Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox back for another episode. And today I'm absolutely thrilled to have with me Jennifer Henczel. I'm not quite sure how we connected. It must have been a ubiquitous email, but she's got some really interesting podcast work going on. You will hear the term Women in Podcasting Network, which she's the founder of, and she's got a great new podcast award competition going on. So we got a lot to talk about. So that incredibly long-winded introduction, Jennifer. First of all, thank you for taking the time to visit with me today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. And thank you so much for being a sponsor of the Women in Podcasting Awards.
So tell us a little bit about your professional background.
So right now I'm the founder of the Women in Podcasting Network and the Women in Podcasting Awards. And I'm a speaker and podcaster and author. And for a long time, I had my business as a side gig to my regular job. And I always wanted to break through, and it always seemed like it was around the corner to be able to turn my part-time gig into my full-time income. And so then a tragedy happened, and my husband was crushed by 12,000 pounds of wood, and he survived. But what really made me look at my life and realize that I had been stuck. And at that time, I was really touched in his long recovery process. I was really touched by the community that came around and gathered around us. And one of the groups was, for example, he was a football coach. And so football players and football coaches would come around and say, "We're here for you, Coach Paul." And he was just it was just volunteer in the community. That was just one of the communities that came around and helped us. And I realized I was really missing that in the business world. And just, I felt like I was stuck and isolated. And I thought, I'm just going to invite some people for lunch, some other business owners. So I kind of put it out there, who wants to join me for lunch? I had 50 business owners show up. And so I was really surprised. And that one meeting turned into a group, and then the group turned into a network. And so that was what I did for about 8 years. I ran this network called Connect Now, and I created it and had different meetings in different cities. I had multiple chapters. And so that's kind of my background of community building. And now I've built several other communities, including the Women in Podcasting Network. And my platform also helped my husband he went from an injured mill worker to an international speaker. He did a TED Talk, and he's written a book about our story. And so that's kind of the background of what brought me to the Women in Podcasting, because we would listen to podcasts to get inspired and motivate us to get us through that hard time. And then we started our own podcasts, and then that led me to starting the Women in Podcasting Network.
Wow. So my story is I'm the one that got injured. I got taken
Oh,
out by a Hummer on a bicycle,
oof.
and that
Oh,
led to Business Pivot One.
okay.
Then I founded the podcast network, and it blew up during the pandemic. So that was Business Pivot too. We'll have to share those stories sometimes. Very cool. How's your husband today?
Yeah, he's got some permanent injuries, but he is a speaker, and he gets a lot of joy out of helping others and motivating others, which I'm sure like you do with your story.
Very much. So I have founded two podcast networks. So I was incredibly intrigued when I came across you with the Women in Podcasting Network. And I'm going to have to brag on some other women to start with, because this is why I was so intrigued with you and about the awards. In 2017, so I podcast in the B2B legal and regulatory compliance space, and I've done so since 2012. And in 2018, two women came up to me at a conference and said, "You need more diversity in your podcast network. We think you should have women." And I said, "You're absolutely right. You guys are going to start that podcast." And they said, "No, that's not what we meant." And I said, "Well, that's what I meant." And they did. And they decided to call it Great Women in Compliance. And then they started a LinkedIn group, Great Women in Compliance. Then this is going to sound familiar. They wrote a book about their podcast experience. And they literally created this community, which is just that, Great Women in Compliance. The first year after the pandemic, one of our big compliance conferences had a workshop on Great Women in Compliance. The next year, they had a 3-hour workshop culminating with lunch. And the third year, they started their own conference. And so I use that story, which sounds incredibly like yours, to say, in the compliance arena, these women changed the world. And they did that by doing what you have done, is create this community. So with that incredibly long-winded introduction, tell me about the community building you've done for women in podcasting.
Oh, wow. That's an amazing story. I need to have you and your other women collaborators there on the Women in Podcasting show. That'd be great. So, yeah. So, what I found out through that first experience when I started that first meeting and the room I had reserved was overflowing, and I found that other people needed to connect too. And so that's why I created the network. And then I ended up selling that one network, and that's why I started the Women in Podcasting network. But I found out that for anything to work, you need to be part of a community and you need to build your circle of support around you, just like you did with your members in your network. You need to build your circle of support around you because it's not going to build itself. And people will help you if you show up to be helped. And I experienced the value of being connected and supported because I have been in hustle mode, right? Where you do everything yourself and you manage everything yourself and you don't need anyone else, right? I had to flip those scripts to become really community oriented and want community. And so opportunities will flow to you if you get connected with the people that you resonate. You have to get out there, though. You have to get out there and show up. And you have to show up as you, not as someone else. That's really important. Yeah.
Can
So,
I rephrase that in Tom speak and
yeah.
say the universe will come to you if you are willing to let it do?
Nice. Yeah.
So tell us about the Women in Podcasting Network. Do you have a theme? Is it, it's obviously women oriented, but tell us about some of the podcasts you have on the network itself.
Wow, we have so many different kinds of podcasts. I'm inspired by the women every day. We have a group of 10,000 women on Facebook, and then we have a group of almost 1,000 on LinkedIn. And so people exchange guest interviews, they find guests, they look for guest spots. So we also have expert guests in our community. And then we have a paid membership where people get access to tools. For example, I give them templates for everything from cover art to speaker bio sheets and all kinds of things. I help them to just get things done quicker. We have a masterclass on starting a workshop and things like that. And then, so we give them support in that way. There's that paid level and then the free groups where we all connect, and it's just a beautiful experience. I mean, we have everything from pet podcasts to motivational and inspirational podcasts, stories like what we have, and then there's professional business podcasts. It's such a wide range. I'm just inspired every day by what I see in the group and the membership.
How many pods on your network?
In the actual paid membership,
Yes.
we have, how many do I have now? Almost 200. It usually goes, there's some attrition, so it goes between 175 and 200, usually stays around there.
I thought I was special because I was 60. Wow. Well done. So let's talk about the Women in Podcasting Awards because that's what I connected you with. And as I nominated my friend's podcast, Great Women in Compliance, for to be considered for the awards. What's the genesis of the Women in Podcasting Award?
Yeah, I wanted to do a people's choice type of awards. What that is, it's not a judged It's not a judged championship or challenge. It's more of a where I wanted to really, everything I do focuses on community building, right? So it had to do with the podcasters getting to know each other, having more visibility for all the podcasts. And so it also will give them a vehicle to connect with their listeners. So when they talk about how they've been nominated and they share their nomination, and we provide them with a little nomination badge that they can put on their website and things like that, just like we've done for sponsors. We give a sponsor badge. And so they can share that. And we've given them some content that they can use to help them because a lot of the women don't have a business skill. So some of them do, obviously, but some of them, they just got out there with their message and they're just enthusiastic about promoting and getting their podcast and their message out there. And so we've given them some tools around their message to be able to get the most out of being nominated and share that with their listeners to rally their listeners around their message and around their podcast.
As all of my listeners know, I live in the great state of Texas, and I hope they understand by now you live a little bit north.
Yes.
Yes. And in fact, north of the border, as we would say.
Yeah.
But I wanted to ask, are your podcasts literally Canadian, North American, worldwide, all of the above, or none of the above?
Mostly English countries, but we have some international and bilingual type podcasts. We've got some from the UK, Australia, mostly the United States, a lot in Canada, of course. And yeah, so I'm in Vancouver. I'm in the opposite corner of the continent to you. I'm in Vancouver, BC, Canada.
So you've got some upcoming deadlines, and I really want to walk all of our listeners through because each deadline has sort of a specific meaning and specific things people need to do. So you told us who can apply. What are the deadlines for application?
Yeah, so we really wanted to help foster people have an interest in podcasting and really encourage women to stay consistent with their podcast. So we do require that people have at least 5 episodes. And so that's good for beginners too, though, right? To get into the community and to connect with people and things like that. So you need to have 5 episodes out at least. But even seasoned podcasters are enjoying it for all the connection opportunities. And so by July 31st, the nominations are over. So if anyone wants to be nominated, they need to get their nomination in before July 31st. And we run that. This is our first year, by the way, of the Women in Podcasting Awards. This is our inaugural year, so we're very excited about it. It's going very well. We are so thrilled. Can you believe when I started this, I thought to myself, oh, what if I just get a dozen or 20 people? That's fine. I can run an awards with a dozen or 20 people. It's fine. It'll be fine for the first year. And then I got up to 30 and I was like, wow, yeah, I can do the awards with 30 people. Sure, that'll be fun. We have over 300 nominations so far. And so on July 31st, that's the deadline to get your nomination in. And then from July 31st to October 1st is when the nominees will ask their audience to vote for them and ask people to vote for their podcast. And we did it till October 1st because as September 30th is International Podcasting Day. So that'll be a great day for the women to get out there and say, hey, it's International Podcasting Day. Today's the last day to vote for my podcast. So you see, it's fostering and, encouraging and rallying listeners to get involved and engaged with the podcaster.
So you told us a little bit about the judging process. I'm not going to say voting process, but maybe I should say voting process. Could you tell it to us again in this segment?
Yeah, so with the type of awards that we have, it's more of has to do with People's Choice Awards. It's a People's Choice Awards. It's not a voting or judging type of awards. And so the podcasters will ask their listeners to vote for them from August 1st to October 1st.
So we are going to link to several of these on our show notes, but would the link to vote be available on the Women in Podcasting website?
Yes, so if you go to womeninpodcasting.net, you can find out all about the awards and our membership.
So tell me about the awards ceremony or how the awards will be announced.
Yes, the awards ceremony will just be open to sponsors and nominees. And so you're invited to join us if you're available. That'll be on October 18th. And the sponsors will be also presenting awards to 1 or 2 of the nominees. And so we'd love for you to be involved with that if you're available, Tom. But yeah, so then we'll release that episode. We're hoping for October 22nd, we'll release that episode with the announcement of the winners publicly. So we'll let the winners know. We'll contact them ahead of time and get them in the event and then release it to the public after that ceremony.
I forgot to ask you, what are the categories of entry?
Wow. Yeah, we have so many categories. We have more than most awards. We'll probably cut it back a little bit next year, but we have A to Z. We've got everything from arts and design. It starts at A all the way down to travel podcasts. I think we have 38 categories. And so you probably don't want me to name all those off, but there's really everything: business, marketing, pets and animals, health and wellness. So everything from A to Z, basically.
So I know you're Canadian and you may be reticent to answer this question, but I have to ask, what's the entry fee? And I ask you that because I enter a lot of podcast awards, so I know what the fees are and I know how reasonable yours is. So tell us what it is.
That's another reason why we did this, because there was a financial barrier for podcasts, because some of them can be dozens or hundreds of dollars as to enter. And so we started with a $10 fee. It was only $10 up until July 1st. And then from July 1st, and that just encourages early birds, right? And then from July 1st to July 31st, it was $20. So right now it's only $20 to be a nominee, to join.
Yeah, that's just fabulous. And I hope that women who may feel like I really can't afford the entry fees for some of the other awards, national awards, will take a look at your award and the entry fee because it's so reasonable. Let me ask you, where do you see, I don't want to say the future of podcasting, but where do you see networks down the road? Is this, you think, a great way for us to build community in whatever our various communities are? And do you see this continue to grow?
I am seeing so much growth in my network, and I really think that podcasts are going to go hand in hand with community building. I think at the center of every community is going to be a podcast. I mean, it's an amazing collaboration between the two. They just fit perfectly together, growing a community and having a podcast. And I think that's just going to get more and more. And we're going to see that even in every niche. We're going to see communities being built around podcasts and podcasts being started in communities. So yeah, I think it's going to become more and more. You can see the media companies all still investing in podcasting. It's just going to grow more and more.
So, Jennifer, unfortunately, we are near the end of our time for this episode, but you have told us where listeners can go. And I'm going to ask you to tell us one more time. And then, of course, we'll link to all of this in the show notes.
Yeah, womeninpodcasting.net. So that's .net, womeninpodcasting.net. And you can find out everything about the Women in Podcasting Awards and the Women in Podcasting Network.
Jennifer, I wanted to take the time to thank you again. I think what you're on to is just fabulous. I can't wait to see the winners of your first annual awards, and hopefully I can come up and participate in the ceremony.
Yay! Thank you so much for having me.